Hey everyone, what's going on? Glad you're here because I've been wrenching away laps and notes to bring you about Automobilista 2 V1.6.8.5. This one is a sweet mix of new content and meaningful under the hood tweaks, and I want to walk you through the stuff that actually changes your time on track, not just the flashy headlines. So let's get right into the seat, belts on, and I'll set the tone with the new toys, then we'll talk feel. Graphics, AI behavior, some setup wisdom, a quick PSA for league racers, and a few little tricks I picked up that will help you jump in with confidence. The new content drops you into that glorious mid-2000s endurance era, and it's like flipping through an old photo album where every picture smells like hot brakes and race fuel. You've got the open cockpit brutes at the top of the pile, with that classic V8 Thunder, a spread of LMP2 that swing between torquey and turbo zippy, and a row of GT machines that made Saturday night TV feel mythical. You can practically hear the clack of sequential shifters and see the glow off the rotors when the sun dips behind the pit straight. Pair those cars with period layouts that bring back gnarlier curbs and slightly less forgiving runoffs, and you've got authentic rhythm, not just same track, different year window dressing. The result is a package that nails the mood. Long gears, heavy braking zones, and the kind of traffic management that rewards patience even more than outright pace. If you've ever watched a dusk into night stint and thought, I want that, this is the closest you've felt in a sim without needing to sign your life away to an LMP program. Of course, new content alone doesn't make a patch meaningful. The real question is, how does it drive, how does it look, and how do the opponents behave? Let's talk driving first. There's been a physics pass across several key classes, and it's the kind of work that doesn't scream at you. It settles in. You pull out of the pit lane and notice your tires talk a bit more clearly. On the limit, the cars don't feel like they're chasing a script. They take a deep breath with you. You know that moment when the rear starts to think about stepping out and you instinctively add that inch of steering and a whisper of throttle to bring it back? That's where the differences shine. Transients feel more connected, and you can tell there's been attention on how load moves through the chassis as you crest, trail the brake a hair longer, and pick the throttle up earlier than you might have dared last month. For anyone who enjoys fine-tuning setups, this is a reminder to start fresh on the classes that were touched. Open your garage, zero out your assumptions, and build up again. Old setups may not misbehave dramatically, but you'll leave pace on the table if you cling to what worked before. Think of it like moving house. You could bring every cardboard box from your old place, or you could open them and decide what still fits. On the visual side, the new temporal anti-aliasing option is the quiet hero for a lot of players. If you've always felt like MSA didn't quite smooth the shimmering fence lines, or you were battling jagged edges in VR or triples, this knocks down those distractions. The rendering feels calmer and more cohesive, especially around track furniture and safety fencing, which used to crawl at certain angles. There's also a sharpening slider paired with it, and the trick is to nudge it just enough to keep instrument clusters crisp without reintroducing grain in the distance. The sweet spot will vary with your resolution, but my rule of thumb, start conservative, run a lap at dusk with headlights in your mirrors, and only dial in extra sharpness if the dials or brake markers feel a hair soft. Night racing benefits too, thanks to stronger, more convincing headlight behavior that pops a little more off reflective surfaces without looking like you strapped the lighthouse to the nose. It's not just dramatic. Practically, it helps with braking references on unlit sections, especially in endurance traffic when you're peeking through two GTs just to find a turning point. Now to the AI, which got a noticeable overhaul in throttle and brake logic. The best way to feel the difference is to run a 10-lap sprint in something lively, say a GT1 or a modern prototype, and watch how they approach corner exits and mid-corner patience. They no longer stomp on the throttle as if there's an on-off switch under their right foot. Instead, they breathe the grip a bit more, which means fewer cartoonish wiggles, less sudden elastic banding, and a better sense of racecraft when they're tucked into your draft. You'll catch them planning a pass a couple corners earlier, positioning for a clean exit, rather than yanking a move that ruins both of your laps. That benefits multi-class especially. When an LMP traffic train arrives, the flow through slower classes is more predictable. If you've struggled with AI aggression settings before, the retune makes the middle settings feel truer. I've had good results parking aggression around medium for endurance-style cars because it reduces those late move lunges into high-commit corners, and stepping up a notch for sprints and open-wheelers where elbows-out behavior is part of the fun. As always, track by track, some combinations like a tick more or less, but the baseline feels more consistent across the calendar. Let's pause for practical advice if you're booting the update for the first time and want immediate gains without spending your night in menus. First, choose a class touched by the physics pass and run a stock setup baseline. Don't import anything. 2 out laps to get heat in, then push for 3 laps and note where the car resists you. If the nose washes on exit, resist the temptation to crank aero. Start with mechanical tweaks like a touch more rear rebound to keep the rear planted when you roll back on throttle, or just soften front rebound a notch so the front tires can reclaim bite. If the rear rotates too quickly on trail, lengthen your brake pressure ramp and trim brake bias forward 0.5% before reaching for roll bar changes. Next, swing into the graphics menu and flip to temporal AA, then do a quick stutter test through a busy sector with grandstands. If you're borderline on frames, back off the sharpening a tick before you lower resolution. You'll often recover fluidity that way without sacrificing overall clarity. Finally, pick an AI strength where you qualify within a few tenths of the top 5. In Racestream, that tends to create the richest traffic and forces you to manage tires and fuel without spiraling into a pace you can't maintain. There's some quality of life polish worth celebrating as well. Setup, autosave, and autoload logic has been tightened up, which helps if you tend to bounce between events and forget to save your tinkering. Controller profiles continue to broaden, and if you run something newer with force feedback quirks, it's worth reselecting your base profile and letting the sim rebuild the bindings rather than copy old configs forward. The shadow flicker that occasionally haunted VR and triple screen users in certain lighting has seen attention, and it makes long stints easier on the eyes. Little things add up. Fewer visual gremlins mean longer runs without the mental fatigue that comes from fighting artifacts or micro stutters. Track content from that era deserves a bit of its own spotlight because the layouts push you into strategies we don't always practice on newer circuits. You'll spend more time thinking about traffic, commit windows. That's the idea that you pick your overtake plan one corner earlier than normal because runoff and curb shapes punish indecision more than modern asphalt deserts. In multiclass, you'll start to count cars ahead and run soft lifts to sync with a gap that opens 3 seconds later. Learning that rhythm is half the fun. And when the sun starts to fade, those stronger headlights I mentioned pull double duty. You'll use them to pick out braking boards, and just as importantly, to sell a move to a slower class by putting light in their mirror at the right moment. That's etiquette and strategy working together. For anyone running communities or championships, a quick PSA, there's still the option to stick with a previous build branch on Steam if your season rules require absolute stability for a weekend. It's meant for situations where the grid is mid-championship and you can't afford to retest setups. The long-term play, though, is to migrate sooner rather than later, because the AI, physics, and visual upgrades are, in combination, worth the move. When you do switch, give your group a simple checklist. Fresh setups for the covered classes, fix your anti-aliasing choice, and do a short AI calibration race so nobody gets surprised by a cluster of late breakers on lap 1. Let me talk feel again because that's what we remember after the screen goes dark. In GT1, that transition from trail to throttle no longer feels like stepping across a line painted on the road. It's more of a sliding door that you can nudge open and hold with your shoulder. In Group C and the older prototypes, the weight transfer under crest and the way the rear tires hint at what they'll accept before they finally let go is clearer, and you can more confidently straddle the serrated curbs that used to toss you skyward if you were a hair offline. For modern machinery like GT3 and current prototypes, the differences are more subtle through the wheel than the stopwatch, but the stopwatch doesn't lie. If you're precise and early with your throttle pickup, you'll start seeing personal bests come more naturally, not because the cars got easier, but because the envelope tells you where it is with less ambiguity. That's the hallmark of a worthwhile physics nudge. Fewer surprises, more mastery.